Imagine this. You're standing inside a museum. You're staring at the skeleton of a dinosaur. Massive, ancient, magnificent. The placard says it died 65 million years ago. Extinct. History. A fossil frozen in time. But then something impossible happens. The room shakes, the floor vibrates, and you realize the museum you're standing in isn't around the dinosaur. It's inside the dinosaur. And worse, it's not dead. It's dying. Right now, with you still inside it. That's the global economy. A giant, collapsing creature, hollowed out from the inside, but still standing, just long enough for people to pretend everything is fine. People scroll through Instagram, they order coffee, they complain about gas prices, but they don't look up long enough to notice the cracks spreading across the foundation. You're not waiting for a collapse, you're living in one. It's just happening in slow motion, like watching a skyscraper fall in zero gravity. You see the beams bending, the concrete crumbling, but your brain keeps whispering, relax. Buildings don't just fall. Except sometimes they do. And this one is already leaning. Before we dive into the mechanisms tearing the system apart, do me one favor. Forget everything you think you know about recessions, market cycles, and financial corrections. What we're talking about isn't a downturn. It's not even a crisis. It's a structural failure. A collapse baked so deeply into the architecture that even the people in charge can't stop it anymore. Because here's the paradox that should chill you. Humanity has more wealth, more data, more technology, and more interconnected systems than at any time in history. And yet the entire structure is more fragile than a house of cards in a hurricane. How is that possible? Simple. We built a global economic machine so massive and so complex that it can no longer stabilize itself. The very tools used to prevent collapse are the same tools now accelerating it. Welcome to the greatest magic trick of the 21st century. Today, we're tearing down the curtain. And it starts with a number so large, so abstract, that most people stop thinking the moment they hear it. But not you. You're here for the truth. The debt supernova, when math becomes a weapon. Global debt, public plus private, has crossed $315 trillion. Not million, not billion, trillion. A number so large the human brain can't visualize it. So let's make it simple. The entire world produces about $105 trillion a year and owes 3 times that. Imagine you're making $50,000 a year, but owe $150,000 on 30 different credit cards, and your only solution is to open more cards. That's the global economy. But here's the part that should terrify you. We didn't get here naturally, we engineered it. In the 1970s, global debt was around 100% of GDP. Sane. By 2000, it hit 200%, concerning but manageable. Then 2008 happened. The financial system crashed under the weight of its own greed. Banks should have died. The bad debt should have been purged. The infection should have burned itself out. Instead, governments kept the corpse alive. They nationalized private losses, printed oceans of money, and injected trillions into the veins of collapsing institutions. It worked, temporarily, just long enough for politicians to declare victory and pretend everything was fine. Except they didn't solve the problem. They exported it. They took the cancer out of the banks and injected it directly into governments. Now the governments are terminal. But wait, governments can print money, right? So they can't go bankrupt, right? That's the fairy tale. Here's the truth. When you print money to pay your debts, you destroy confidence. And confidence is the invisible glue holding the entire economic universe together. You can't see confidence. You can't measure it precisely. But when it evaporates, the system implodes at the speed of panic. Every currency collapse in history, Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Argentina, wasn't a failure of math. It was a failure of belief. Once people stop believing money has value tomorrow, the game ends instantly. We are watching global belief erode in real time. The supernova is already expanding. The central bank trap. The prison with no door. Let's talk about the people supposedly in control. The Federal Reserve, the ECB, the Bank of Japan. These institutions were designed to stabilize economies, to smooth out recessions, to be the adults in the room. But something went wrong, very wrong. Central banks had a simple toolkit. Economy slows, lower rates. Inflation rises, raise rates. A thermostat for capitalism. But after 2008, they panicked. They turned the thermostat all the way down to zero, and then broke the dial. For over a decade, interest rates were near zero. Money was essentially free. Trillions were printed and poured into financial markets. And instead of fixing the machine, they overheated it. All that money didn't go to workers. It didn't fix infrastructure. It didn't build new industries. It didn't raise wages. It went into assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, fine art, crypto, luxury goods. The rich became astronomically richer. The middle class was slowly crushed. And now, central banks face an impossible choice, a zugzwang. Every move makes things worse. If they keep rates low, inflation explodes, groceries double, savings die, social unrest ignites. If they raise rates, governments, corporations, and households drown in interest payments. Defaults cascade, markets collapse, economies freeze. This isn't a policy dilemma, it's a structural trap. Japan entered this trap 30 years ago. Zero rates, endless money printing, government buying its own bonds and even stocks. And nothing worked. Japan became the future, a preview of what happens when an economy becomes too indebted to grow. Now Europe and the US are joining them. This is the point in the movie when the audience whispers, "Wait, how do they get out of this?" They don't. There is no exit. There is only delay, until delay is no longer possible. Because once you turn money into a drug, the withdrawal is fatal. The everything bubble and the world built on sand. You've seen the first cracks in the dinosaur's ribcage, the debt supernova and the central bank trap. But those are just the bones. Now we step into the organs, the systems pumping fake life through a collapsing creature. If debt is the cancer and central banks are the painkillers, then what comes next is the hallucination. The illusion that everything is fine, the lie that keeps the system standing long after it should have fallen. Welcome to the everything bubble. The everything bubble, when reality becomes a mirage. Here's a question that should haunt you. How can stock markets hit record highs while the real economy is falling apart? People can't buy homes. Food banks are overflowing. Middle-class families are drowning in credit card debt. Wages have been flat for 40 years. And yet, Apple is worth $3 trillion. Luxury goods are selling out. Mega yachts are backordered for 2 years. And real estate in major cities costs more than entire towns. It feels impossible, contradictory, like two realities running in parallel. That's because they are. We haven't created prosperity. We've created asset inflation, the richest illusion in economic history. Cheap money floods markets. Prices go up. Everyone feels richer. But here's the catch. It's not wealth. It's leverage wearing makeup. Let me show you how deep the illusion goes. In 2008, we had one bubble, housing. Painful, destructive, but isolated. Today, we have all of them at the same time. Stock bubble. Companies with negative earnings worth billions. Bond bubble. Governments issuing debt they can never repay. Real estate bubble. Homes priced at 7 to 12 times income, historically unsustainable. Corporate debt bubble. Zombie companies surviving only because borrowing was nearly free. Crypto and speculative asset bubble. Digital coins created as jokes hitting billion-dollar valuations. Luxury and collectible bubble. Watches, sneakers, artwork, all inflated artificially. Every asset class inflated simultaneously, not because fundamentals improved, but because central banks turned the financial system into a helium balloon. This isn't a market, it's a hallucination. And hallucinations always end the same way, with a brutal awakening. The pop, and why this time is different. In 2008, when the bubble burst, investors fled stocks and hid in bonds. Bonds were safe. Governments were stable. Cash had value. Not anymore. Today, bonds are backed by governments drowning in debt. Real estate depends on cheap borrowing that no longer exists. Stocks rely on profitless companies. There's no safe corner left in the room. Because the fire isn't on one side this time, the building itself is burning. The only historical parallel is the late 1920s, when credit expansion, speculation, and delusion created the perfect storm. But even that doesn't capture today. Because our economy isn't just inflated, it's interconnected, tightly coupled, a web of dependencies, a domino chain with no spacers. One sector collapses, everything collapses. But the bubble alone isn't the real danger. The real danger is what supports it. A supply chain system so fragile that a single missing cog can tear the entire engine apart. Let's walk into the bloodstream of this dying giant. The supply chain fracture, the just-in-time apocalypse. For 40 years, corporations worshipped a single god: efficiency. Minimize inventory, eliminate redundancy, cut costs to the bone, store nothing, ship everything, rely on dozens of countries for a single product. This philosophy was called just-in-time manufacturing. In theory, it's genius. In practice, it's Russian roulette with the global economy. Just-in-time works only when nothing goes wrong. But the world is not a well-oiled machine. The world is chaos pretending to be order. And in 2020, chaos won. Toilet paper shortages, baby formula shortages, semiconductor shortages, grocery store shortages. People laughed about the toilet paper. They shouldn't have. We came weeks away from real food shortages. The global economy was exposed as a brittle system, held together by duct tape and prayer. And here's what should disturb you. We didn't fix it. We patched it. The way a collapsing bridge gets taped up to survive one more year. But the cracks are still spreading. Let's look at the weak points, the organs failing inside this dinosaur. Europe's energy collapse, when a continent hits reality. Europe built its entire industrial base on cheap Russian natural gas. Factories, steel, chemicals, heating, electricity. Then geopolitics flipped a switch, and overnight, the economic core of Europe went into cardiac arrest. Energy prices quintupled, factories shut down, entire industries became unprofitable. Germany, the industrial heart of Europe, faced the most severe economic contraction in 40 years. This wasn't a recession, it was a structural break. A reality check delivered with the force of a hammer. The Taiwan problem, the single point of failure. Now we move to the scariest supply chain dependency in human history: semiconductors. Every digital device you own, your phone, your laptop, your car, your fridge, lives and dies by chips. And the world's most advanced chips come from exactly one company, TSMC, located in Taiwan. One earthquake, one blockade, one conflict, one political miscalculation, and the global economy stops. Not slows, not struggles, stops. No new cars, no new electronics, no banking servers, no logistics networks, no AI. We've built civilization on a single island hovering between two superpowers in one of the most volatile regions on Earth. This isn't risk, this is insanity. But the supply chain break is only one organ failing. Another is collapsing right beneath society itself, the middle class. When the middle class dies, nations fall. Let's cut deeper. The death of the middle class and the uninsurable future. The bones have cracked. The organs are failing. Now we reach the heart. Because no system collapses from numbers alone. What collapses first is the people living inside it. Civilizations don't fall when the elites struggle. They fall when the middle class, the stabilizing force, the engine of consumption, the backbone of democracy, is gutted from the inside. And that is exactly what's happening right now. Not suddenly, not explosively, but in slow motion. A suffocation so gradual most people don't feel the fingers tightening around their throat. Until they wake up one day and realize they can't breathe anymore. The quiet extinction of the middle class. For 70 years after World War II, the developed world operated on an implicit promise. Work hard, earn stability, build a future, a house, a car, college for your kids, a retirement that didn't feel like punishment, a life with forward momentum. That promise has been broken. Let's walk through the crime scene, piece by piece. Exhibit A, housing, the dream turned prison. In 1970, the median home in the US cost about 2.5 times the median income. Today, 7 times or more. In major cities, 10 times to 20 times. This isn't a market. It's a gated community guarded by hedge funds. Institutional investors began buying homes by the thousands, outbidding families, turning neighborhoods into rental empires, and inflating prices far beyond wage growth. Your parents bought a home with 1 income. You can't buy a home with 2. The American dream didn't die, it was privatized. Exhibit B, wages, frozen in time. Adjusted for inflation, real wages have been flat for over 40 years. Think about that. For 4 decades, the average worker gained nothing. Meanwhile, college prices exploded, healthcare costs skyrocketed, housing became unattainable, childcare doubled or tripled. The cost of living rose like a tidal wave, while income stood still like a rock. The middle class wasn't outspent, it was outpaced. Exhibit C, education, the new debt trap. In 1980, college cost about $3,000 per year. Today, $30,000 plus. Adjusted for inflation, that's a 10 times increase. College became less about opportunity and more about indentured servitude. A generation walked into adulthood carrying debts larger than mortgages before even earning a paycheck. Education wasn't expanded, it was monetized. Exhibit D, healthcare, a system that profits from pain. Medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. Not bad investments, not failed businesses, not overspending. Healthcare, a system where getting sick means financial ruin. A society where survival itself is a luxury product. Exhibit E, the illusion of prosperity. Middle-class life has become a magic trick. You're shown the illusion, the vacations, the new iPhones, the sleek apartment aesthetic. But behind the curtain is maxed credit cards, rising rent, no savings, no retirement plan, crushing student loans, wages that don't match inflation. Consumption hasn't risen because people got richer. Consumption rose because credit filled the gap. Debt replaced prosperity. Borrowing replaced growth. The illusion replaced reality. The dinosaur is collapsing, and the people living inside are being crushed quietly, slowly, invisibly. But the next part is where the story shifts from economic decline to existential threat. Because when the cost of living becomes unbearable, society strains. But when the cost of survival becomes impossible, society breaks. The uninsurable world, when nature sends the bill. There is a silent actor in this story, a force that doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise, doesn't care about GDP, inflation, elections, or quarterly earnings. Nature. For 200 years, humans extracted resources and dumped waste without accounting for the cost. We borrowed from the future and assumed the future wouldn't ask for repayment. But the bill has arrived, and it's bigger than any government can pay. The insurance apocalypse has already begun. Insurance is the invisible stabilizer of modern civilization. Your house, your car, your business, your crops, they only exist as valuable assets because insurance companies agree to protect them. When insurance collapses, economies collapse. And it's happening now. Major insurers are pulling out of Florida due to hurricane risk. They're abandoning California due to fires. They're retreating from coastal regions worldwide due to rising seas. When you cannot insure a home, you cannot mortgage it. When you cannot mortgage it, the housing market collapses. We're not talking millions. We're talking trillions in real estate value vanishing. The world is becoming uninsurable. Not hypothetically, not decades from now, right now. This is not a climate issue. It's a financial time bomb. The coming scarcity era. As weather grows more extreme, expect crop failures, water shortages, food instability, resource conflicts, mass migration. When people can't eat or drink, they don't debate tax policy. They don't argue about culture wars. They revolt. Every civilization collapses the same way. The elites become detached. The middle class becomes desperate, and the poor become dangerous. We are entering that equation. But we still haven't reached the darkest part. Because economic collapse, demographic decline, and ecological stress are only the surface. The real danger comes when all three intersect, creating a feedback loop of instability. To understand the next stage, imagine living inside a structure where the beams are cracking, the wiring is faulty, the roof is leaking, and no one at the top admits the building is unsafe. Because admitting the truth would cause a panic that collapses it instantly. Welcome to the final act of systemic decline, the part where governments can no longer hide what's coming, where institutions lose legitimacy, where trust evaporates, where the illusion dissolves, where collapse stops being slow and starts being sudden. We're almost there. Techno-feudalism, controlled collapse, and the world after the fall. The dinosaurs' bones are cracking, the organs are shutting down, the heart, the middle class, is collapsing. And yet, somehow, the creature still walks, still moves, still pretends to be alive. But now we reach the final revelation, the part most people never see, because it happens behind closed doors, in boardrooms, server farms, and think tanks where no election can reach. This is not just a collapse. It is a controlled collapse, a transformation, an evolution, a handoff from one ruling structure to another. You were taught that history moves from era to era. Feudalism, capitalism, democracy, globalization. But history is not linear. It circles back. It repeats in disguise. And what we are entering now is not capitalism, not socialism, not democracy, not dictatorship. It is techno-feudalism, a world where the lords don't own land, they own servers, they own data, they own the rails of the digital world. And the peasants aren't tied to soil, they're tied to platforms. This is the final phase of the collapse. Not the end of society, but the end of the economic system you grew up in. Let's pull back the curtain. The great privatization of reality. In feudal times, the lord owned the land. If you wanted to eat, live, or survive, you needed access to that land. Today, land has been replaced by digital infrastructure. The new lords are Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, SpaceX. These companies don't just participate in the economy, they are the economy. They control cloud computing, app stores, operating systems, payment networks, digital identity, online communication, distribution, logistics, AI models, satellite networks. You don't rent from them. You don't buy from them. You exist inside their world. And the most terrifying part? Governments do too. When nations become clients. The CIA's data is hosted on Amazon AWS. The Pentagon runs on Microsoft servers. Cities rely on Google for maps, analytics, traffic patterns, and cloud tools. Hospitals rely on private vendors for patient records. Small businesses can't function without digital platforms. The modern state isn't sovereign. It's a legacy user on a privately owned platform, and platforms can shut you off. The first example of this new power wasn't financial, it was military. The Starlink precedent, when a billionaire overrides a war. During the war in Ukraine, Ukrainian forces relied heavily on Starlink satellites for communication. But reports emerged that when Ukraine attempted certain operations in Crimea, Starlink coverage was restricted. Why? Because one man, Elon Musk, didn't want to escalate the conflict. Pause and let that sink in. A sovereign nation, in the middle of a war for survival, had to align its military strategy with the personal preferences of a private CEO. Not the UN, not NATO, not an elected government. One guy. That is techno-feudal power. It doesn't lobby governments. It bypasses them. It doesn't influence policy. It replaces it. And AI will accelerate this transition faster than any technology in human history. The AI oligarchy. Whoever controls the models controls the world. For the first time, humanity is creating a technology that can replace labor, replace expertise, replace creativity, replace decision-making, replace institutions, replace human coordination. Artificial intelligence is not a tool. It is a parallel intelligence, and whoever owns the large-scale models owns the new economy. If you control the AI that runs logistics, you control global trade. If you control AI that runs military targeting, you control conflict. If you control AI that runs search and information flow, you control public opinion. If you control AI that runs supply chains, you control governments. AI is not replacing workers. AI is replacing sovereignty. And here's the darkest and most important truth. For the first time in human history, the elites may no longer need the masses to maintain their wealth. When the rich no longer depend on labor, the social contract dissolves. Pensions dissolve. Welfare dissolves. Democracy dissolves. Not because of malice, because of irrelevance. We are approaching a world where millions become economically unnecessary. But collapse doesn't end here, because once institutions lose legitimacy, once governments lose control, once people lose faith, the final stage begins. A stage as old as civilization. The loss of trust, the point of no return. Every system runs on trust. Money works because people trust it. Banks work because people trust withdrawals. Governments function because people trust laws. Democracy survives because people trust each other. Media shapes reality because people trust the narrative. When trust disappears, collapse accelerates. And we are approaching that threshold. People don't trust banks. People don't trust governments. People don't trust media. People don't trust corporations. People don't trust elections. People don't trust each other. A society can survive corruption. It can survive inequality. It can survive incompetence. But it cannot survive the end of belief. When trust collapses, systems don't fail gradually. They fail instantly. This is the spark that ignites revolutions. But here's the twist. Every collapse in history has also given birth to a new order. Not better, not worse, just different. And that's where you come in. What comes after the fall? Most people imagine collapse as a dramatic moment. Markets crash, banks fail, riots erupt, lights go out. But that's not how it works. Real collapse is quiet, slow, incremental, invisible until it's irreversible. It's not an explosion, it's erosion. 1,000 small failures, 1,000,000 individual decisions, a gradual unraveling of assumptions we never thought to question. But collapse is not the end. Collapse is transition. The feudal world gave way to the industrial world. The industrial world gave way to the digital world. The digital world is giving way to the algorithmic world. The question isn't, how do we stop collapse? You can't stop a dinosaur from dying. Its time has passed. The real question is, what replaces it? Who shapes the new world? Who writes the new rules? And will you be a passive observer or an active participant? Because history is not written by the powerful. History is written by the aware. Most people will sleepwalk into the new order. A small group will see it coming. An even smaller group will prepare. You are now part of that group. Once you see the strings, you can't unsee them. Once you understand the system, you can navigate its collapse. Once you grasp the mechanisms of control, you can stop being controlled. The collapse is not the end of your story. It is the end of the world you were born into, and the beginning of the world you will build after.